Welcome to How to Yu-Gi-Oh!
Healthy board examples.
Chapter 1.
Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about the healthy boards and their examples that we find in Yu-Gi-Oh! In a previous video, I talked about healthy boards, and I know a commenter put in there and said there were not enough examples. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the examples that I feel are what consist of a healthy board, what I feel a healthy board is, and how it should look like, and the archetypes, or rather, the process to getting to a healthy board. With that being said, let's get on with the rest of the video.
Chapter 2.
Here we are. So let's talk about Spright. Now, when I think about Spright, and I just think about pure Spright, right? Pure Spright to me is what makes a healthy board. And it's one of the decks I faced a few years back, pure, in fact, when it first premiered. And the board that it made initially, without obviously adding the engines in, the Frog engine, the Live Twin engine, the Nibblebonga engine, you know the deal, was relatively healthy. And don't get me wrong, it could do quite a lot of things. And when other engines were added onto Spright was when it started doing really unfair things. In fact, in my personal opinion, one of the most complicated and most sophisticated decks has been Runic for Hire Spright. To this day, I think that is a deck for big brains and is one of the most competent decks and most creative deck we've had in Yu-Gi-Oh! History.
Believe it!
3 archetypes that do so many things and are essentially just great relationship there. Now, with that being said, let's go to the next slide as I talk about the Spright.
Chapter 3.
And here you have it. As you can see in front of you, you can see there's Spright Red and Spright Carrot. And obviously we see set there is Spright Double Cross and Gigantic Spright. Now, when you're playing pure Spright, obviously, and this is the Spright we're talking about when it first premiered, without adding all those things, this is an example of a healthy board. Now, what I mean by this, obviously, they're not going to have both Spright Red and Spright Carrot down there. Most often than not, they'll have Spright Red down there. I think if the deck performs, if they've had a really good turn, they'll have Spright Red and Spright Carrot down there. But usually they'll only have one of the two if they've gotten hit with a hand trap. And then on the next turn, they'll use Spright Double Cross in order to make an additional Spright negate. Now, you look at this board, and even if it has those 2 cards on the board, there's only 2 negates here. And in my personal opinion, but also to explain what a healthy board is, 2 negates are the maximum of what I feel a healthy board should be.
2 is the best number for this job.
Right? 2 is enough. It is the perfect number for a healthy board. The moment you go to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, possibly even double digits, that is when, of negates, that is when it is a toxic board, right? As long as there's 2 concurrent negates on the board, it's fine. 2, the reason why 2, I consider that to be the maximum and a healthy board is because the opponent can play around them. With any deck that you have, if you can play effectively and efficiently, you can play around them. There's back and forth. The moment there are more than 2 negates down there, then we have a problem.
To infinity and you lose.
Whether there's a hand trap down there as well backing this up or any other things backing this up, 90% of the time, if there are 4 levels of disruption from your opponent, that is a toxic board. So as I've said, 2 omni negates, 2 just negates, not omni negates really, but just 2 negates. There could be 2 omnis, whatever they are, is the max, as I would say, for a healthy board. And I would say Spright Pure Spright, when it first premiered, as we can see here, even with Spright Double Cross, yes, made a healthy board. Let's move on.
Chapter 4.
Okay, and now on this slide, you can see the next archetype that I feel has really good potential is White Forest. When I talk about a healthy board, White Forest comes to mind. Now, White Forest to me has a similar application or similar ability to Branded. If Branded gives so much versatility, flexibility, and has a high ceiling, White Forest is the same. I find that whatever white forest, just essentially how it is, can make boards that are extremely fascinating, and it seems to be the secret source of synchro decks since it's come out. Add white forest to a synchro deck, and you elevate that deck to a whole new level.
I can't deny that. It's just the truth at this point.
Okay? Similar to Branded, where you can just put Branded in any fusion deck and it elevates it. White Forest does the same. Why is that the case? The thing is with this card called Diabelle, Queen of the White Forest. First of all, let's go to the next slide and look at the board. We look at the cards that White Forest needs to make a sort of competent board. We see Shamisen Samsara, Sorrow Cap. We have Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon. We have Diabelle, Queen of the White Forest, and we have Visas Amitara. Okay? And you can see with Shamisen that it can be once per chain and can be used for a synchro summon on your opponent's turn. Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, when it will obviously be made on your opponent's turn, gives you so much access and so much ability. The fact that when Crystal Clearwing is destroyed, you can add any wind monster from your deck to your hand is absolutely huge.
That's too strong.
This means you can add any wind hand traps. You can add combo extenders, combo starters. There's so much possibilities. The ability to add any wind monster from your deck to your hand cannot be understated here. This is absolutely cracked beyond belief. In fact, you can even add Mulchami Fuel Loss. Yes, Fuel Loss is a wind. My goodness gracious me, the broken stuff just doesn't end there. Anyways, let's move on, and we have the Diabelle. Again, Diabelle allows you to special summon a level 7 or lower synchro monster from your extra deck or graveyard. And yeah, because it will be count as its synchro summon, you can activate its effect right there, and you have Amitara to do that. Now, let's go to the next slide to see the board that is created. So you can see the board here. Now, to me, this again facilitates a healthy board. We have obviously the Omni with reframing that's added with Amitara, and then we have the Clearwing Synchro that can negate level 5 or higher. Remember, this is not going to negate obviously Nibiru, as it has to be on the field. Now, you look at this board, and the only thing that this board has is one disruption. This indeed is a White Forest build. Whenever White Forest is played, you only have usually one form of disruption or one form of negation. You have two, essentially you have two here, one form of disruption, which is Diabelle, which would go into the Shamisen. Shamisen would then synchro summon with Clearwing, and then Clearwing would get you Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, which would give you a negate there. This to me is what epitomizes a healthy board once again. Now, you have two forms of disruption, right? One is an Omni, another is a quick synchro on your opponent's turn, meaning allowing you to synchro summon yet again. This means that you only get to disrupt your opponent once. This is fantastic, and this showcases to me what a healthy board is. What I consider a healthy board, and why I consider this a healthy board in part of my healthy board examples, is because it has a maximum of 2 disruptions. 2 is the magic number. 2 is where I stay. 2 is where we need to be.
2 is the best number for this job.
If there are 2 negates, 2 disruptions, 2 of anything, that is the maximum. That is a sign of a healthy board. When we have more than 2 disruptions, more than 2 negates or omnis, more than 2, then we have problems. Anything that's more than 2 does not create a healthy board. While yes, many would argue, and you would argue and say that, but sensei, though, we have board breakers, we have all these things, but that doesn't mean anything. Just because you have board breakers, the board that you are building should not have more than 2 disruptions. If it has more than 2, then that isn't a healthy board. It is doing something unhealthy or trying to promote something unhealthy. Let's move on.
Chapter 5.
And here we have the next healthy board example, which is Chimera. You can see Chimera there. You can see all manners of things there. So let's go to the next slide. And on the next slide, you can see here the 2 cards that we'll be using to build this board, which is Chimera, the Phantom of Beasts, allowing you, again, as a player to randomly discard a card from your opponent's hand in the end phase, I believe, and Chimera, which is, you'll usually make it on your opponent's turn to pop 2 cards and draw a card. So let's look at the final board. We look at the final board there, and you can only see a Chimera Fusion and Chimera King of the Phantom Beasts. Now, Chimera, again, just makes 1 disruption, possibly 2, but just 1, really. And Chimera is a sort of deck, again, pure Chimera, when it first came out, is a good example of a deck that makes not a lot of disruption. And even when it does, the disruption it makes, just pure Chimera anyway, is not enough. It's when Chimera is paired with Branded, but even when it's paired with Branded, it's not making anything crazy. These are 2 archetypes that just make multiple disruptions, and this is where I would say it's an exception to the rule, where the boards that Chimera and Branded make are quite significant and are not really unhealthy, as they still promote interaction. Interestingly enough, is that when we combine Chimera with some illusion stuff, with Sinful Spoils, and add in obviously the Nightmare Apprentice, and add some other things to Chimera, we get some very interesting things that we can do, and we go to essentially toxic behavior or toxic things.
You can't handle the truth.
One of the interesting things is that when Chimera as a base form makes a pretty healthy board, but when we combine Chimera with Sinful, Sinful Spoils or Snake Eyes, and then add as well a Fiendsmith package in there, all of a sudden, it's making a really quite toxic board. It's very interesting, I have to say, that Chimera, low-key, can be a meta deck depending on the engines that you add to it. You could add White Forest to it, you could add some illusion searches to it, and the possibilities are endless as to the boards that you are making. So definitely pick up illusion, I would say. Chimera, I would say, sorry, and some illusion cards, maybe even some Sinful Spoil cards. Not the expensive ones, obviously, the ones that are cheap, and see what you can do. Let's move on to the next thing.
Chapter 6.
And here we have Prank Kids. This is another deck that I would say creates a healthy board. Let's go to the next slide, and we can see Prank Kids Battle Butler. Bow Bark, Prank Kids Place, and Prank Kids Pandemonium. We can go to their final board, and we can see here that this is the board that it makes. Simply going into making a Battle Butler, meaning that you can destroy your opponent's field twice, since you have Meow Mew in the graveyard and all manners of things. Again, just 1 form of interruption, which is destruction, is not an unhealthy board. It is very healthy and can do a lot of things. And even when you make your final board that has the link 4, Prank Kid that destroys spells and traps, again, that is not unhealthy. Having spell and trap destruction along with, Battle, which is the monster field destruction, is extremely healthy board. What did I say before? 2 is the magic number. 2 forms of disruption, and only 2 are healthy. This is not including hand traps, okay?
Facts.
If you have 2 forms of hand traps and no disruption on the field, that again I see it as a healthy board, okay? It has to be 2. 2 is the magic number. Let's move on.
Chapter 7.
Ever since Centurion has come out, it's a deck that is quite low to the ground. Doesn't make and especially did extremely well in TCG when Fiolos just came out. It could play, the archetype could play under Fiolos very well, make a relatively low to the ground or, not a big board strategy, and was quite effective.
Nice!
Let's look at the next slide, to see the kind of cards we're making. We're making Cosmic Blazar Dragon, Red Eyes Supernova, Stand Up Centurion, and Centurion Legata. Let's look at the final board that it makes, and you can see that we only have one form of Omni Negate with Cosmic Blazar Dragon and Red Eye Supernova Dragon, which can just simply banish your opponent's entire field. Again, very simple, very powerful. These two cards, Red Supernova Dragon and Cosmic Blazar Dragon, don't do much and are only two forms of disruption. But in fact, it's these two forms of disruption, when used efficiently, and they are, can do a lot of damage to your opponent even when they have a lot of interactions with you. And Centurion, to me, is the epitome of what a healthy board is. Having so little, but doing so much with it.
It's all coming together.
To me, Centurion is what epitomizes what a healthy board in its healthiest state can do when it maximizes its efficiency and effects to the highest level. Much more than branded or the like. And I would say Centurion is, to me, a healthy board by all stretches of the imagination. You only have two forms of disruption. Yes, you could go into your opponent's board, into your opponent's turn with Stand Up Centurion to make Centurion Legata. But the point is here is that this, to me, what Centurion does to me is how a healthy board should be set up, how a healthy board should be, and the ideal scenario of how us as players should be making healthy boards in the future. When you make a healthy board, it should be similar to Centurion. You need to do a lot with little that you have. You need to maximize your cards that you make so that you can do so much with so little. And this is why I regard Centurion to be an extremely powerful deck. You got to remember, during the time when Centurion came out, when Fiolos came out, this was a deck that was dominating in TCG especially. Now, yes, the deck has lost, obviously, Calamity, but let that not be mistaken. Except for losing one card, this is an extremely powerful deck. Is it the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh right now? Absolutely no. But what Centurion showcases to us in Yu-Gi-Oh, and what it showcases to us as players, that you can have a very strong deck and you don't need to have a lot of disruptions. In fact, you only have two forms of disruptions here. Just two. And how these two are used, how they interact with your opponent, is what matters.
Chapter 8.
Tri-Brigade makes a fantastic healthy board. I remember at the time when this archetype came out, and even now, still to this day, it makes a relatively healthy board. Let's look at the cards that are used. It's Tri-Brigade Shureg, the Ominous Omen, Tri-Brigade Revolt, and Tri-Brigade Ferajit, the Barren Blossom. Now, let's look at the field that it makes, and we only have Tri-Brigade Revolt going into Blossom, using those for a link summon on the opponent's turn to make Shureg. Shureg go banish a card on the opponent's side of the field.
Keep it simple.
And that's pretty much it. It is simple. Tri-Brigade could be combined with other archetypes at the time. You can still combine it with some beasts and some other things, and you can do quite a lot of things here. So definitely, there's a huge amount of potential, and again, you only have one disruption. But add other archetypes in there, add all manners of things there, and Tri-Brigade can do a lot for quite little. And I think that's it. That's all I'm going to cover. So let's now head to the end of this video.
Final chapter.
Here I am at the conclusion. So, what do I want to say about healthy boards in the examples? What I want to say is, when it comes to healthy boards, these are what I feel constitute a healthy board. So, overall, what am I talking about a healthy board and what is it? A healthy board, in my opinion, is a board created in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or a board that you create that has two forms of interruption with your opponent. Whether it's two Omni Negates, two Negates, two Disruptions, or two Hand Traps. The point is, 2 is the magic number, and 2 is where it should be, and 2 is where it should stay.
2 is the best number for this job.
Now, when you have more than 2 interruptions, or 2 of anything, that's where it goes a little bit haywire, and that's where interaction is not usually allowed in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that, to me, is not a healthy board at all. Healthy board should have 2. Now, yes, you could say there are some exceptions, like with Branded, obviously, which it has a lot of disruptions, but it doesn't really stop your opponent, and you can still interact with it. You also have, I would say as well, Centurion as well. It can also do a lot. It can have 3 interruptions. It can have more than 3 interruptions, but don't really interfere with your opponent, especially where it is now, where we don't have Calamity. To me, in my hot take and personal opinion, Centurion, where it is now, right, with Calamity banned, and the board it makes now, especially when Fiolas came out in TCG, epitomizes to me what a healthy board is and what it can do at the highest level. To me, Centurion is the ideal goal of the sort of healthy board you want to be making as a player in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you want to make a board that can really interact with your opponent, disrupt them, but at the same time, make them powerless. You only have 2 cards down there. These 2 cards don't do much, which is Cosmic Blazer Dragon and Red Supernova Dragon. Now, Cosmic Blazer Dragon is simply just one Omni Negate. You have Red Eyes Supernova Dragon, which banishes on, effect activation when your opponent activates, and in fact, banishes all cards they control. These 2 cards don't really do anything, okay? In terms of disruption, they're absolutely, interaction with your opponent, they're absolutely hideous, grotesque, and useless. But how you use these 2 interactions and how you interact with your opponent, and depending on what they've made, you can completely stop your opponent in their tracks just with these 2 forms of interaction. And to me, that is what a healthy board should be. That, to me, is how we should be interacting with the opponent. We should not be interacting with the opponent in terms of negation. We should be interacting with them with meaningful interactions that can stop them without really stopping them.
What the hell does that even mean?
And that's why I like Centurion so much, and that's why I put Centurion in such high regard, is because it really goes to the highest level of what a healthy board should be. Because a lot of people, will say Centurion is an unhealthy board, but it's not, though. While yes, it can technically stop your opponent in their tracks when the interactions of Red Supernova Dragon and Cosmic Blazer Dragon are used efficiently, but if you stop it quickly enough, it can do basically nothing. And so there's my hot take on on Centurion, and it being the epitome of what I consider a healthy board. And these, to me, are the examples, anyway, in this video, of what a healthy board is. So to conclude and to just summarize, again, a healthy board in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a board in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is any board that is created that has 2 forms of interruption to your opponent. 2 being the singular number of the magic number of interruptions that you should be having. When we have more than 2 forms of interruption to our opponent, then that is too much, and it is not a healthy board anymore. That is a board that is severely unhealthy. While there are exceptions to the rule, these are exceptions and few and far between. Those exceptions will only apply if your opponent is able to interact with you in a normal game environment. When I say normal game environment, is that they can play their deck, right? And they can still be able to put up a decent board even through those interruptions that you have. So what doesn't count is that you have two obviously interruptions on your field, and you then have two hand traps in your hand. That would be in my book 4 interruptions. And that's a big no-no. That would fall under not a healthy board, but a slightly toxic board. And even slightly toxic board is not exactly easy to deal with. Sure, it's not fully toxic, but just because it's not fully toxic doesn't mean it doesn't have some toxic tendencies. And a slightly toxic board can quickly go out of control and become full toxic and full out of control, and we can't deal with it. That's it. So tune in next time as I'll talk about other things on this channel. Hope to see you soon.
We come to the end of this video. So, as I like to say, you are one step closer to becoming a Yu-Gi-Oh! Master. My fate, right, is in your hands.